Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am very pleased to welcome you to the joint webinar between EASA and ANAC on the new revision 5 of the technical implementation procedures for airworthiness certification and environmental protection. My name is Eduardo França. I work for ANAC in the Technical Agreements and International Cooperation Group under the Airworthiness Department. And I had the honor to participate in the working group, the joint working group between EASA and ANAC for the development of this new revision of the TIP. The other members of this working group are also here today, and we will deliver this webinar for you. So I would like to ask my colleagues to present themselves. First Daniel from ANAC, and then the EASA team with Jean-Louis and Charles. So please, Daniel.
Hi everyone, my name is Daniel Pessoa. I'm the Project Certification Manager Team Leader. In my branch, we support and deal with validations and primary certifications for foreigner and Brazilian applicants. Thank you.
Good morning and good afternoon to all. I am Jean-Louis Amelot, working for EASA in the Certification Directorate and member of this group as the Secretary of for EASA for the Joint Sectorial Certification Committee. I take this opportunity to thank ANAC for providing this YouTube channel to provide this common webinar between EASA and ANAC, which is to present this TIP Revision 5, which is the result of 2 years of work, and more than happy to present it to you.
Bom dia a todos. Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Charles Leboeuf. I work in EASA in the Certification Directorate, where I am Chief PCM in charge of the validation process. Very happy to be part of this webinar.
Okay, thank you guys for your presentation, and thank you for your valuable contribution in the development of this webinar and the great work during the development of the revision. We are very happy with this achievement, and we hope that we'll improve the efficiency of our services. And that's it. So I do not want to take much longer, but I need to give some general information on this webinar. We intend to make this presentation. It will take around 1 hour. Okay. The presentation will be recorded and will be kept available on the YouTube channel. So if you want to watch it again later, or if anyone missed that, you can access with the same web link that you have now. Okay, on my side, on my right side, there's a QR code. This is to access the Slide2 application. The Slide2 application is for you to provide questions that you may have during the presentation. So it's just to put the question and send it. The other participants all will have access to all the questions, and there's the possibility to vote on which questions you found relevant. At the end of the presentation, we will try to answer questions, the most popular question first, within the time we have. Okay. So the QR code also, the link for the Slide2 is also available in the description under this video. And also under this video, there's a link for the presentation we will use during this webinar. Okay, I think that's all the information we need to give you now. Okay, let's start with the presentation. Just a moment for sharing my screen. Okay, here we go. So the TIP the technical implementation procedures are performed under the bilateral aviation safety agreement that was signed between the government of Brazil and the European Union in 2010. This is a high-level agreement that established cooperation between our nations in many aspects of the civil aviation. This TIP established the procedures related to the airworthiness of aircraft, which includes design approval, continuing airworthiness, export procedures, technical assistance, and special arrangements. Now initiating the presentation. So this is not a complete course on the TIP. This presentation is delivered to provide an overview of the revision 5 of the TIP, the most important novelties, and some differences from the agreements we have already in place, and also to provide you an opportunity for questions and answers at the end. In background, this new revision is based on the TIP and the IPA that ANAC and EASA have already in place with the FAA. So the TIP in revision 7 between EASA and FAA, and the IPA in revision 2 that ANAC has with the FAA. The idea was to have a more harmonized document and procedures, but we adapted the document for the EASA and ANAC needs. The sections of the document from 1 to 10 are the same sections that we have in the agreements with the FAA. The main conceptual difference from the last revision of the TIP is the change in the involvement philosophy, when we adopted a risk-based procedures to establish the validating authority involvement. This is to show you that we started discussing these new implementations in September 2021, when the TIP was already in the revision 3. From that time on, we had a lot of discussions, a lot of virtual meetings. We had 2 face-to-face meetings in 2023, and we provided another important milestones was a round of internal comments where we provided an opportunity for all affected areas to give comments and to contribute in the development of this TIP. And then we managed to sign finally this agreement on October 2024, which came into force this month of January. Okay. This is the TIP structure, all the sections and appendixes. And those who are familiar with the agreements that we have with the FAA will find it that is very harmonized. So there are many important sections that are the same. For example, the section 2 brings the scope of the TIP. Section 3, the design approval procedures. The section 4 for the continuing airworthiness, and section 7, the export procedures. Okay, and we have also in the appendix some specific procedures for our corporation. Okay, so we will pass through each one of those sections of the TIP and trying to highlight the differences and the important aspects of each one. Okay. The purpose of this TIP is to provide an appropriate procedures for design approval, production, import, export, and all the aspects. This was developed based on some principles. The most important is to maximize the use of the certification system to ensure that the requirements from the validating authority are satisfied. This will be achieved by recognizing by the mutual recognition of each other's certification system, including the accreditation system used by ANAC and the design organization system that are placed by EASA, as well as the approvals from each other. The governance of the TIP are performed by the Joint Sectorial Committee on Certification, the JSCC. the JSCC has the authority to approve this tip and to approve revisions to this tip, and this group is encompassed by the ANAC Head of Airworthiness Department, Mr. Roberto Norato, and by the EASA Certification Director, currently Mrs. Rachel Deschler. Okay. We had there a section for governing the interpretation and resolution of conflicts. We have the main concept that the interpretation of the regulations, laws, and standards from one authority when we are discussing some interpretation. The interpretation of that authority that is owner of the regulation shall prevail. It's also established that conflicts resolution are encouraged at the working levels, and they should only be raised to the management if it's not possible to solve it in the lower levels. We have a section of revisions and amendments and the points of contact, establishing what are the appropriate branches for any issues. A section for the effective dates and termination of this tip that will give you some more information in the next slide. And a section for terminology, where many terms and wording are explained in the beginning of the document. I would like to highlight one term, the small aircraft, that was created within this tip for using in this tip, and it means it's an important term created to designate those aircraft that are eligible for streamlined validation. So these times are small aircraft with maximum 5,600 kilos, sailplanes and balloons with maximum 6 passengers. Okay, we will provide some more information on next slides. And we have done the transition rules from revision 4 to revision 5 of this tip. The tip will enter into force 90 days after signature. So actually, it entered into force in the last Sunday, 3 days ago, on January 26. And then this new revision will be used for all the new validation projects initiated after this entry into force. The validation projects initiated prior to this date will use the tip revision 4, unless, in a case-by-case basis, the ANAC and EASA mutually agree to use the new revision. Okay. Either ANAC and EASA may terminate this tip upon 60 days notice to the order. However, we established that all approvals and all activities conducted prior to this termination should not be affected. So we will recognize anything done until the termination of the tip. In section 2 are established the scope of this tip. What is this tip for? We have design approvals such as type certificates, supplemental type certificates, its amendments and amendments to TCs, other design approvals according to the tip, the repair design approvals, the export certificate of airworthiness for new and used aircraft, and the authorized release certificates for new engines, propellers, articles, replacement, and modification parts. This is all that was already in place in the revision 4. That's nothing new here. But we have a novelty when we talk about the certificates of conformity for parts which consequences of non-conformity have negligible effects on safety. Actually, the certificates of conformity for standard parts was already in place. It's not novelty. But what's new is that ANAC and EASA are now accepts some parts, some certain parts that comply with certain criteria to be delivered without an authorized release certificate. These parts can be delivered only with a certificate of conformity. And which are those parts? These are parts that the design approval holder should make a risk assessment and to conclude that any non-conformity on these parts have negligible effect on safety. And then after the design approval holder includes that part in its instructions for continued airworthiness, then this part can be delivered without a Form 1 and without an ANAC authorized release certificate. Another novelty is the prototype parts. So only one way is the EASA will accept the authorized release certificates issued by ANAC for prototype parts, for parts delivered before the approval of the type certificate. Once the design approval holder provides a statement that the part has not changed from the time it was produced until the tip was issued. The section 3 describes the design approval procedures, and these procedures are based on a high degree of mutual confidence that EASA and ANAC have in each other. So both authorities has already a long history of good cooperation. We are providing validation of designs for many years, and we recognize each other's aircraft certification and approval systems and our capability to perform our duties. So the idea is to give maximum credit to the approvals granted by the certificating authority and minimize the retention of compliance determinations by the validating authority. The procedures were developed respecting the sovereignty of ANAC and EASA and their responsibilities, and recognizing that the tip will not intended to diminish responsibilities and the rights of each authority to access information about type design. Okay. As well as we already have in the agreements with the FAA, we adopting the 3 streams of approval. In the acceptance, the validating authority automatically accepts design approvals granted or the approvals granted by the other authority. In this way, there's an application is not needed, and also it's not needed also an issue of approval document by the validating authority. Sorry. We have the streamlined validation where applications are mandatory and they are needed when we have a design change classified by the certificating authority as basic. And yes, there is an application. However, there is no technical involvement from the validating authority. And the application is needed for the validating authority to issue a design approval. And we have finally the technical validation, where an application is needed for designs classified as non-basic according to the criteria on the tip. There will be, or there can be, technical involvement from the validating authority, and it requires the issuance of a design approval by the validating authority. We'll check it out, each one of these 3 streams in more details now. So these are the eligibility. Which design approvals are eligible for acceptance by the validating authority? In the first place, the design changes proposed by the design approval holder that is classified as basic according to the criteria on the tip, and that do not require the CA to issue a new approval document. All minor changes are also eligible. Even if differences in definition exist, we are aware that definitions of minor change in ANAC system and the EASA systems are different, but we considered it is a low risk, so it was considered to be acceptable, the automatic acceptance of minor changes. The TSO articles are also eligible for acceptance. We have no more list of TSOs that we had in the revision 4. Replacement parts are also automatically accepted unless they are considered critical parts or life-limited parts. All design data for repairs are also eligible for acceptance, and design data for ANAC major alterations. So the major alteration is kind of a kind of approval that exists only in the ANAC system, not in EASA's, and it's very close to the FAA field approval, with some important differences. For example, the ANAC alterations shall be approved only by ANAC, and in some specific cases, in very few specific cases, by an accredited professional that is the ANAC designee. These alterations are performed under the RBAC 43, so this is a maintenance requirement, and by concept, it is equivalent to the ANAC minor changes under the RBAC 21. And because of this equivalency, these are also automatically accepted. And what's the procedure for the acceptance of approvals? So there's no need for application, and the change will be accepted by the validating authority without any review. In such cases, the certificating authority will use its own certification system, will approve it according with its own procedures against the certification basis of the certificating authority and the other authority. These changes are considered approved by the validating authority and are included in its type design data. We have a detail here that when that changes affects the EASA official noise database, there are some specific data that must be submitted to EASA, already described in section 3542G on the tip, and this data shall be notified to EASA for EASA to be able to update its database. This notification is not considered an application because the design change is already approved. It's considered approved, but the notification is mandatory. Taking a look now in the streamlined validation eligibility, what's eligible for the streamlined? So those minor design changes that classified by the certificating authority as basic, but do require the CA to issue a new approval document, are eligible, and also new type certificates for reciprocating engines, propellers, and small aircraft are also eligible for streamlined validation. If you remember, I mentioned the definition of a small aircraft on the beginning, and those definitions establish which aircraft is eligible for the streamlined. Of course, these new type certificates can be approved by the streamlined validation unless the certification basis from both CA and VA includes ANAC exemptions or the equivalent EASA deviations, special conditions, and any of the ANAC ELOs or the equivalent EASA equivalent safety findings. Okay. Now going to the process for the streamlined validation. So an application is needed. The applicant must apply for the CA concurrence. So the certification authority checks the application classification as basic. It ensures the data package is complete, and the CA will issue an endorsement letter or a confirmation document that all the application package is correct and is complete. Then the application is sent to the validating authority, and then the validation authority has 10 days to acknowledge the application. It has also 30 days to request any additional or missing data in the application package. and conduct a review of supporting documents without any technical involvement. The validating authority will only make an administrative review of the documentation and check if the documents are correct and they are complete. And after this administrative review, the validating authority issues a design change approval within 15 days or a type certificate approval within 20 days. If the validating authority deems the application is not eligible for streamlined validation, there is some problem in the classification of the application, then we have specific procedures called the technical consultation process. That is an opportunity for the validating authority and the certification authority to talk together and find a solution for the classification. We will provide more details on this technical consultation process in the next slides. So, yeah, at this time, I think it's already enough from me. I would like to invite my colleague, Charles, to continue the presentation. So, Charles, please.
Thank you very much, Eduardo. So we now with the third pass of validation, the technical validation. And we will present the technical validation eligibility and afterwards the procedures. So which are the design which are subject to this technical validation? By definition, this is all application for an initial type certificate for aircraft engine or propeller, except those, as explained earlier on by Eduardo, that would be eligible for a streamlined validation. That means to say those TCs that would be basic classified for reciprocating engine and our small aircraft, provided there is no new or amended special condition in their certification basis. All the others will be type certificated under a technical validation process. This is also the case for all design changes that meet at least one of the non-basic criteria. We're going to see in the next slide which are those non-basic criteria. So you've got here the list of the applicable non-basic criteria that you can find in the tip under the paragraph 3534B. These are criteria that are you'll see quite similar to the existing criteria, namely with the FAA between the EASA and the FAA tip. To start with, well, the first one is whenever the changes requires a change to the CA or VA certification basis, including or anticipating to include a new amended exemption for ANAC, deviation for EASA, a new amended special condition, or a new amended equivalent level of safety for ANAC or ESF for EASA. So in that context, we've got a note in the tip saying that new or amended is considered in the context of the project and relative to the baseline certification basis of a product or STC being changed. That means that if for the sake of getting a design change validated, a design change to a type certificate, for instance, if you need to introduce a special condition that is not yet part of the TCDS of the product, then it's considered as a new special condition and it will trigger the non-basic classification. And the second criteria is the whenever a change of significance has been made by the certificating authority in accordance either with ANAC RBSC 21101B, when it's ANAC the certificating authority, or in accordance with the EASA Part 21A 101B. The third criteria is for the change which affect compliance with an Airworthiness directive, which has been issued either unilaterally by the validating authority. So here in the case where the VA is the only authority having issued a specific AD, or changes that affect compliance with an AD for which the VA is the state of design for the type certificate. So in that case, the change would trigger the non-basic classification. The fourth criteria is for the change involving the use of a new or different applicable method of compliance, so different from that previously agreed between ANAC and EASA. Here, a method of compliance, a MOC would not be considered new or different if it has been already applied previously in a similar context between EASA and ANAC. The next criteria is the new technology. So that's a criteria which is also present in some other TIP and IPAs. The sixth one is whenever the change puts into place a novel technology, well, a novel application of an existing technology. So it means that the technology itself is not new, but it's its application which is new. Then it's where the technology is applied in a manner that causes the precepts of that technology to be questioned. Typically, the example we usually quote is that, let's imagine for a change, an applicant would use additive manufacturing, but so existing technology, not new technology. The validating authority has already seen that technology, but the way that technology is applied is not anymore, let's say, on small items, but will be applied on particularly critical PSI, so on principal structural items. Then one may consider that the concepts of the technology that is used are not valid anymore, and they need an involvement from the validating authority. And as such, the change would be classified as non-basic and submitted potentially to the review and the involvement of the validating authority. The next criterion is for those changes that have an appreciable effect on the constituents of the operational suitability data. So either an appreciable effect on any EASA OSD constituent, and for the determination of that appreciable effect, there is a note to refer to the guidance material 21A91, or in the case of an EU application to ANAC, whenever the change would have an appreciable effect on the ANAC-OSD constituents, which are in the legal framework of ANAC since the beginning of the year, namely the flight crew and the MMEL. The next criteria is an effect on the environmental protection requirement. And here the criteria we use is that any substantiation to environmental protection requirement that would involve standards not specified in the volume 1, 2, and 3 of ICAO Annex 16 would trigger the non-basic. What we mean with the standards involved are typically the SARPs, the standards and recommended practices that are specified in the volume 1, 2, and 3 of ICAO Annex 16. Additionally, any change involving an aeroplane CO2 emissions is considered as non-basic. And the last criteria is any of the change designated as non-basic by the CA. So here is the criteria to leave to the CA the appreciation for a change that maybe would not trigger any, literally would not trigger any of the criteria above, but would be any time really on the limit. So there may be a good reason why the CA would say, okay, could not trigger, the change did not formally trigger any of those criteria, yet we believe that there is an added value in the validating authority to be aware of that one, just for information, at least. So we decide to send it to the validating authority as a non-basic. And so if you're quite familiar with the applicability of such non-basic criteria, you will have noted that there is no SEI, safety emphasis items. This is an item that we will discuss a bit further on in the presentation, but one of the specificities of that TIP revision 5 is that the effect on a safety emphasis item is not a criterion for triggering the non-basic criteria. We will come back to that later on. So here on that slide, we've got an overall view of those criteria that we've just explained and a comparison with what exists in the ANAC-FA IPA in the current EASA FA TIP revision 7. And then on the last column on the right, what is proposed and part of the TIP revision 5. So we see that modulo few wording differences, but the criteria remain really the same for the criteria 1 to 6. Now we start to see a difference with the criteria number 7. There is no criteria on effect on the OSD between ANAC and FA, for the good reason that FA does not have OSD in their framework, and ANAC at the time of signing that IPA did not have yet the OSD in their framework. The other difference, and main difference, is about the environmental substantiation. So the environmental protection is dealt between ANAC and FA with regard paid to the acoustic or emission changes. That would be a triggering factor. In the EASA FA TIP revision 7 is whenever the change impacts the environmental protection, then you've got reference to a set of dedicated criteria that guides you to determine whether it can be considered as basic or non-basic. Here, once again, what we put in place in the STIP revision 5, which was thought to be more commensurate and adapted to our relation between EASA and ANAC, is that we will accept as basic any change that would affect the environmental protection requirements, provided they follow the SARPs which are given in the IKA 1816, volume 1, 2, and 3, with the exception, as said, of the CO2 emission changes that would systematically trigger a non-basic classification. And the last difference is, as was already mentioned, is that a change that will impact the SCI list of the validating authority will not be considered as non-basic in the frame of the ANAC-EASA. Now we've got in this slide the procedure for the technical validation. We make reference to the paragraph 351 for the preparation and sustaining of the application, and 355 for the process of technical validation. The process is the following. A bit like for the streamline validation, there is first an action from the CA before the application for validation is sent to the VA. The CA needs to check the appropriate classification, so in that case, non-basic classification. The CA must also check those items affecting the non-basic classification, ensure that the data package is complete, and issue an endorsement forwarding letter that would stipulate that the proposal sent by the applicant has been reviewed and endorsed by the certificating authority. In that case, the VA will acknowledge the application within 10 days of receipt. It will afterwards have 30 days to request additional or missing data. After this, the VA may decide or not to conduct some technical familiarization. The technical familiarization, it's a new entry also in the TIP revision 5 with reference to the revision 4. We've tried to be a bit more descriptive in what a technical familiarization should be and what it should not be also. Meaning that during the technical familiarization, the VA will have the opportunity to understand the design, to make the determination of effectively what are the affected non-basic, what are the non-basic criteria, and to determine what would be to put in place its appropriate requirements for that change. If after that technical familiarization, the validating authority decides that it will, on top of this, have some involvement afterwards on certain aspects of the change, then the VA needs to develop a validation work plan. And in this work plan, the VA will explain the scope and depth of its technical involvement, knowing that the principle is that that level of involvement should be limited to the triggered non-basic criteria, plus, in the case of a non-basic change, any item that would be part, potentially, of the VA list of safety emphasis items. We'll come back to that, but you see, SCI is not a criteria for non-basic classification. However, whenever a change is classified non-basic, the scope where the validating authority is supposed to exercise potentially its technical involvement is contained, is framed to the trigger non-basic criteria, plus any item that will be within the list of the validating authority's SCI safety emphasis items. As was alluded to by Eduardo earlier, if the CA has some concerns on the VA's level of involvement, the certificating authority can request the technical consultation. We'll come back to that a bit later, but it's a mechanism whereby both authorities can engage into a discussion and find a resolution. Then the activities of validation will be executed in accordance with the work plan. And ultimately, the CA will provide a statement of compliance with the applicable VA requirements, which are stipulated in the validation work plan also. And after this, the VA will issue its approval after issuance of the CA approval. So we've introduced in the TIP revision 5 the use of the validation work plan. All the details are contained in paragraphs 3555D. The validation work plan is mandatory for the technical validations whenever there is an involvement, a technical involvement from the validating authorities after the technical finalization. So the expectation is that that validation work plan should be issued shortly after conclusion of the TechFam and before any activity of technical involvement, of verification of compliance, for instance, takes place by the VA. the initial issue of the validation work plan, and any update of that validation work plan, namely in the frame of a concurrent validation, whenever that update will be to expand the VA involvement, shall be approved by the validating authority management. I've explained the role of the validation work plan is to define the scope and depth of VA involvement in a technical validation project. The scope is really all the area where is the validating authority intending to exercise some kind of involvement, and the depth is a description of which is the level of involvement, up to which detail the validating authority is going to be involved. Is it just receiving for more information one document to go a bit further in the understanding of the means of compliance that have been applied, or is it in verification of that compliance and taking on board, retaining the compliance for a given with a given requirement? This all has to be described and justified in the validation work plan. As we explained, the scope of the validating authority's involvement is limited by the affected non-basic criteria, potentially complemented by any element that would be present in the SCI list published by the validating authority. The resources allocated by the VA for its declared involvement in the validation work plan are expected to be compatible with the declared involvement in order to obtain the approval within a reasonable time frame. And we are engaged in discussions with ANAC to define and develop throughout the year 2025 a work plan template that would illustrate all these elements as per the provisions given in paragraph 35580. Now you've got on this slide a glimpse at the previous validation workflow that was in the TIP revision 4, so up to last week, let's say. So should be used to that validation workflow. So there was a classification as minor or major. The minor were accepted. Whenever we had a major change, the TC or STC holder had to classify either major level 2 or major level 1. Level 2 was automatically accepted, provided there was a demonstration of compliance with the requirements of the VA. And when there was a major level 1, application to the VA. And here we had usually and previously an open, let's say, level of involvement without predictability, without visibility to the applicant, and the scope of that potential level of involvement from the VA was completely open. At the end of the process, the CA had to provide to the VA a statement of compliance for all the ML1 changes, but also for the level 2 changes. And the VA issued the approval, particularly for the major change level 1. So that was the past. Now, the applicable validation workflow is the following one. So here the design change. The applicant has to refer to the new criteria for classification. Well, first, either the design change, as was explained previously, falls into the category of acceptable design changes, at which point there is an acceptance by the VA, or it needs to be validated. Then there needs to be a classification. Is it a basic validated change? It will be streamlined validated, as was explained, and that's the upper part of the graph here. In that case, so there will be an application to the VA with a CA endorsement letter. This time the application will be accompanied by a forwarding letter by the CA that will endorse the fact that this change is eligible to a streamlined validation. There will be no technical involvement from the VA, and based on the statement of compliance provided by the CA, the VA will issue its approval. Whenever the change is classified as non-basic, then there will be an application to the VA, here again with a forwarding and endorsement letter provided by the CA that will check and endorse the applicable classification as well as the triggered non-basic criteria, plus a proposed potential involvement to the VA. That should also include the affected safety emphasis items which have been identified. In this case, the VA will decide whether it needs a technical familiarization or not. And when the technical familiarization takes place, and after that some involvement by the VA is foreseen, there will be a validation work plan. This validation work plan will explain and will describe the level of involvement of the VA limited to the non-basic criteria, potentially complemented by any affected element of the SCI. The validation activities will be conducted in accordance with the work plan, and at the end of the process, the CA will provide to the VA statement of compliance which will pave the way to an issuance of the validated certificate. Important to note that in these cases, either just after receipt and analysis of the application package or after the technical familiarization, the VA has always the possibility to step directly to the request for the CA statement of compliance. So there's always the liberty left to the CA to engage or not in some involvement after the technical familiarization, but the TIP provides dedicated guidance in the case where after receipt of the application package or after concluding the technical familiarization, the VA wants to provide directly with the approval of the change on the basis of the statement of compliance provided by the certificating authority. The next slide, we got here some explanation concerning the technical consultation process that we already mentioned. In fact, it is twofold. There are two instances where we can trigger that technical consultation process. The first one is whenever the CA forwards an application. So there's the endorsement of an application that comes to the VA. And then the VA has some concerns, either with the classification or with the identification of the non-basic criteria. Maybe the CA has forwarded something proposing a streamlined validation, a basic streamline, and then the VA looks at it and say, for me, it needs to be, it should be a non-basic. Then there is a process explained in the tip where the post authority will engage in a dialogue, and this technical consultation is intended to provide an opportunity for the CA to explain its rationale on the design classification, and also for the VA to present its concern. So when after consultation, the CA determines that its classification is indeed consistent with the TIP criteria, the VA shall proceed with the processing application. On the other side, where the CA determines that a reclassification is appropriate, should not be a streamline but a non-basic, then the CA application shall be amended to indicate the revised application. The CA shall provide, of course, explanation of the final decision for the final classification to the VA. In all cases, in that case, it's the CA that has the last word. The CA position prevails, and it has to be followed by the VA at the end of this consultation process. The second part of the technical consultation is this time on the validating authorities level involvement. Here we are in the case where the VA intends to have an involvement. It's stipulated in the validation work plan, and then the CA has some concern with this. So that consultation process is intended to give here again an opportunity for the VA to explain its rationale on the level involvement to the CA, and also to the CA for the CA to present its concerns. If at the end of this consultation the VA determines that its proposed involvement is consistent with the TIP criteria, the VA shall proceed with processing the application and conducting its level involvement as per the validation work plan. In the other case, where the VA determines that it should review its involvement, this is appropriate to reduce or review at least this involvement, the VA will update the validation work plan with the new involvement. In all cases, the position of the VA this time will prevail. And I think I give it over to you, Jean-Louis, for the continuing airworthiness.
Yes, thank you, Charles. Now we are continuing with the other section of the TIP, which are definitely not modified at the previous one. Nevertheless, they are also important. So continuing airworthiness is definitely something which requires a cooperative provision between ANAC and EASA to fulfill our continuing airworthiness obligation under ICAO Annex 8. So, of course, we will exchange all MCAI ADs related to the product certified by each authority. It is recognized that all AMOC issued by the authority for the state of design is automatically accepted by the authority for the state of registry. And of course, I would say according to ICAO, the state of registry retains the authority for decision on final action to be taken. So what is important in this paragraph is really the exchange of information to help each other to maintain the continuing airworthiness of a product. And sharing the service difficulty report is definitely something which helps to achieve this target. Next slide, please. As in the TIP revision 4, we have still this section about administration of design approval in order to cover the case of transfer of TC. We have more and more cases by these days. Unfortunately, also some surrender of TC and STC when we have to take the decision to revoke or suspend the TC and STC. And for TSO or OTP, it's the same when there is a surrender or for withdrawal of the approval. So this procedure allows both authority to fulfill their ICAO requirements and also ensure that the validity of affected design is maintained when applicable, of course. Next slide, please. So for production, it's very clear in the bilateral itself that we have a mutual acceptance of everything related to production. So the tip is quite limited on this and make reference to the BASA. And we consider that the oversight performed by one authority is accepted by the other authority without any further requirements. For Section 7 export airworthiness approval, the main change which has been clarified is at the bottom of this slide is that used engine, propellers, and articles are now dealt under the maintenance annex and under the related procedure related to maintenance. But for, I would say, new aircraft, new engine, new propeller and articles, of course, procedure is there to explain what is expected from each authority, the export certificate for aircraft, and the ARC for airworthiness release certificate for new engine, propellers, and article. And of course, the conformity has to be ensured with the type design which has been validated, any AGs, and that the conditions for safe operation are ensured. Next. So technical assistance, I would say, is a paragraph which is almost in all our tip, is to provide the provision in case one authority needs the assistance of the other authority, either for certification and validation support or conformity and surveillance report, and airworthiness certification support, and sometimes technical training. So I would say the provision are there, and I have to say, considering the good relation between ANAC and EASA, it's used on a regular basis, definitely between our authorities. Next slide, please. Special arrangement, unfortunately, the tip cannot cover all the cases, and there is a provision to nevertheless be able to, in addition to the tip, to have special arrangement. Today we have only one, which is for the production of Elibras using an EASA design from Airbus helicopter. So this special arrangement clarify who is responsible for what, in order to be sure that nothing is left behind. Next. Yes, thank you. So Section 10 is really the page of signature when the tip has been signed in October by our directors, and confirm what was already said, that this tip entered into force last Sunday. Yes, nothing else to say about that. Next slide. And we have several appendices. Most of them were already the previous tip, the addresses and point of contact for a different, I would say, topic. What are the current regulation and design guidance material used by both authorities? The list of acronyms, because unfortunately we are using a lot of acronyms in this tip. The record of revision, which confirm what has been done for each revision. And a new appendix is for the SCI. I think you have understood that we, even if it is not a criteria for the classification of design changes, we are using existing lists which are published by EASA and ANAC, which have been developed for our relation with the FAA, but we have considered that we can use it to frame the level of involvement when the non-basic criteria is triggered. So once again, it's not a criteria, but when the non-basic classification is confirmed, the level of involvement of each authority could be, because it's not, once again, it's more guidance to use the SCI to do that. And this appendix gives the place, so the EASA website and ANAC website, where you can find this list. And the last one was already in T-Prevision 4, is the management plan for ELIBRAS, as I explained before under the section 9. And I think this is the last slide. Yeah, so back to you, Eduardo, for the question received during this session. Thank you very much.
Eduardo, I think you are on mute.
Oh, sorry, I'm mute.
Yes.
So thank you very much for your attendance and for the many questions that we received. We received 12 questions that we will try to answer now. Thank you to my colleagues also for helping this presentation. Okay, let me take a look on the questions that we have already. As I mentioned, we have until now 12 questions in the Slido platform. The first one with 10 votes is related to the AFMs, the air flight manuals. So there are no non-basic criteria for air flight manuals. So any changes to AFMs not affecting OSD should be classified as basic. I would say that this time that changes to the AFM alone may not trigger an involvement criteria. However, those changes should be evaluated according to all the non-basic criteria as any other design change. And we'll check all the criteria, and if nothing is triggered, then it's a basic change. Okay. Go to the next question. So the item 3537B7, non-basic criterion, changes that have an appreciable effect on any one of the OSD. What does appreciable effect means? So this non-basic criterion was written at the time that ANAC had not yet published its guidances on the OSD regulation. So, but now we have this guidance material, and this guidance material was developed based on the EASA guidance material, and we believe that there is no much differences from the guidances in the EASA. ANAC already has two guidances related to OSD. The supplemental instruction 21.61-001 that is related to flight crew data, and the supplemental instruction 21.61-005 that's related to NMEL. Okay, so the definition and the evaluation about what is an appreciable effect can be found on those guidances. The next question is streamlined validation meaning changes with an impact to the ANAC TCDS? So if I understood well, no. If each one of the certification authority or EASA or ANAC needs to issue a new revision or new amendment of the TCDS that is considered an approval document, yes, it is can be a streamlined validation. Okay, but what defines if you need to use the streamlined or the technical validation process is the impact on the non-basic criteria. So if the non-basic is triggered, then it's technical validation. And for a major change, if any one of those non-basics are triggered, then it can go through the streamlined validation. Charles, do you have something else to complement? You are with the hands up.
Yes, thank you, Dodo. Just one more to confirm that it's whenever there will be an effect to the CA. It's to the CA either type certificate, TCDS or TCDSN in the case of EASA, that would trigger potentially at least, as you well explained, at least the streamlined validation. It could be non-basic by virtue any other non-basic criteria, but it's at least streamlined if the CA has to update one of its certificates. So with regard to the way the question is mentioned, that would be for Brazilian changes. If there would be an effect on the ANAC TCDS, then that would warrant at least the streamlined validation, provided that the non-basic would not be triggered by any other criteria.
Yes, great. Thank you. Thank you, Charles. Next question is AD issued by the VA triggered the non-basic criteria. Considering ANAC and EASA automatically, maybe it's missing a word. Considering EASA and ANAC automatically accept each other ADs, does it mean only VA exclusive issued ADs? Yes, I understand that when a design change affects an AD issued by the VA, yes, it triggers the non-basic criteria. That's true. Charles, will you complement it?
Yes, maybe what are those two criteria we explained? It's either in the very rare case, and that's true that it would be extremely rare, where the VA, so in that case, let's take EASA as a validating authority, whenever EASA would have issued a unilateral AD, meaning that we would have imposed an AD on a Brazilian product, whereas on your side you would not have imposed that AD. It's very rare on a hypothetical case. Then that would trigger non-basic. The other case is whenever a Brazilian change would be defined again a product for which EASA is the state of design, typically an EU TC holder product. A Brazilian applicant defines an STC, for instance, and that STC affects an AD for which EASA as a VA is a state of design. Then that would trigger the non-basic classification. Same thing in the case of an EU operator or an EU applicant that would define an STC that would affect an ANAC-EASA that would be raised on a Brazilian product.
Yes, thank you. Good, Charles. So next question is the definition of special condition in TIP considers environmental protection. However, RBAC 21.16 defines special condition considering only safety. Please clarify. Yes, that's true. The definition of special condition has not changed from the TIP in the revision 4, and we did not evaluate that on the course of the development of the revision. And we already identified that there's some difference from the RBAC 21.16, and we are noted to change that definition the next revision of the TIP. Okay, but yeah, you're right. The special condition does not consider environmental protection. Okay, next question. Is streamlined validation meaning changes? Oh, I already answered that one. ANAC issued by the VA. I'm sorry, validation is also answered. Thank you for the session. Reference date for ANAC validation of design changes is date of application to EASA. I think the question is related to what is considered the application date for means of the certification basis. What we consider an application date is the date where the validating authority receives the application. Okay, so this will be after the endorsement letter issued by the certificating authority. Daniel, do you have something else?
Yes, I did not understand very well the question, but there are two kinds of application date. The administrative date for application, of course, is the date that the validation authority received the application. but the date for referencing the certification basis, especially for airworthiness requirements, this is another date with another criteria, okay? Could be used the original date of the application in the primary certification system. So it depends of the intent of the question. I did not understand very well. If it's
Okay, Charles, something else to complement?
Yeah, if I may give it a try. The way
Yep.
I understood the question was for an applicant, an EU applicant. I think the question stems from an EU applicant. An EU applicant applying to ANAC for a validation. Yes, in that case, for the setting of the ANAC certification basis for the airworthiness aspects. For the airworthiness aspects, ANAC will take into consideration the date of application to EASA in order to specify what would be the airworthiness aspect. The TIP gives further guidance with what regards the environmental protection requirements and the OSD, but for the airworthiness aspects, it is indeed the date of application to EASA.
Okay, thank you. Next ones. For non-basic major changes, should be a familiarization meeting between the players, CA, VA, and type certificate holder necessarily be held, or is it at the discretion of the VA? Understand that this is on the discretion of the VA, but probably is very rare. It's very unlikely to have a validation project without a technical validation project without a familiarization meeting. Okay. Session. Next one.
Eduardo.
Yes.
Of course, if it's a new TC or significant or a new model, is common to have the validation familiarization meetings, but for design change, it is common not having familiarization, depending upon the design change.
Okay, Charles.
Yes, if I may, I agree to that. Thank you, Daniel. And that's why you will certainly notice that the application package for non-basic changes have been revised. It's much more detailed. It's more complete than one in the previous TIP revision 4. And the intent is really to provide the validating authority with sufficient information for a simple and uncomplex change that a familiarization meeting would not be systematically necessary. But it's, as you well indicated, left up to the VA. However, it really depends, I would say, on the complexity of the change. But there's no obligation to follow and to convoke a technical familiarization meeting.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Charles. Next one. How does an importing company find out which STC's major changes, major repairs are validated in case of basic accepted or not validated? We understand that it depends major on the certificating authority. That certification authority can check when exporting an aircraft that all changes and validations are already validated by the other authority. Okay. Next question. Can flight attendants validate their licenses with EASA? I am sorry to say that this TIP has not how can I say, the attendance regulation. It's not in scope of this TIP. This TIP is really much more on the certification of aircraft and exchange of products between authorities. Can you highlight differences from the TIP revision 4? So it's a very generic questions. We tried a lot on this presentation to present to you what are the differences, including a flow chart of what was practiced in the revision 4 and what is now included in the revision 5. So as mentioned, you can download that presentation. It's available in the YouTube channel under the video. And check it out, what is included there. Okay. Next question. Can you specify timing of release of working plan by the validating authority as it relates to concurrent and sequential type validation? So for the sequential validation, the validation work plan should be issued right after conclusion of the familiarization, and it's established in the tip. For the concurrent validation, I will need to ask my friends some help. So Charles, please.
Yes, few words on that. You will not find, and that's made on purpose, that there is no hardwired requirement for a date of issuance of the validation work plan after the familiarization, because you understand that it's linked to the complexity and the type of application. So the tip just says it needs to be provided after the technical familiarization, rapidly after the technical familiarization. What we explained in that presentation is that also before you enter into any verification of compliance, into any involvement after the tech fam, it should already be vetted and agreed by the management in the validation work plan. So it means no further involvement than the tech fam before the validation work plan has been issued. And the last point is that we said that we would work along this year to define a template for the validation work plan. So typically there would be soft guidance that may be provided that will need to be discussed between ANAC and ourselves on what is recognized as the best practice. But definitely there is nothing that is in the tips that could be taken as a hard guidance for issuance of the work plan. Obviously, the expectation that should be reasonably soon in the process. What we always say is that what we do not want to see is a validation work plan issued right at the end, just for the sake of complying with the requirements of the tip. That does not serve any purpose. That needs to be done up front and sufficiently soon and rapidly after the tech fam.
Okay, thank you. Next one, how will eVTOLs be assessed under the tip? So eVTOLs is a kind of aircraft that will be also eligible for certification. So there will be a type certificate on that. So we understand that eVTOLs will also be evaluated and approved according any other aircraft, any other type certified aircraft. So if you have any comment on that, but we see the tip is fully compatible with eVTOLs.
Yes, if I may,
Yep.
Of course, if there is a TC, the tip, the BASA are fully covering the product with a TC. During our negotiation of this revision, we were considering to add also some product without a TC. Unfortunately, currently the BASA is limiting the issues to the product with a TC, so we were not able to extend the scope of a tip to this non-TC product, which could be already today for LSA, for instance, which have no TC in Brazil. And but for tomorrow, we may have some eVTOL, depending on their mass and so on, or even later, most probably some drones, where we may have an interest from industry to exchange this product between Brazil and the European Union, and for which we will work on the revision of a bilateral agreement to cover this type of product, because there is a lot of work done for the transferability of this type of product. But for the time being, we are stuck by the bilateral agreement.
That's good. Thank you. Thank you, Jean-Louis. Next question. If a major level 2 from previous tip, from the tip revision 4, approved by EASA, but not yet applied to ANAC, it be considered non-basic or assessed under the older tip? How to control it? So major level 2 is major level 1, major level 2 is a definition included in the last tip revision. So if we already started a project for validation of a design before they enter into force, okay, all the provisions from the revision 4 will be adopted, unless, of course, there is a mutual agreement between the agencies. However, if the change has not been applied yet, so it should be evaluated under the TIP revision 5 provisions. Okay. Important companies, sorry, I already did it. You can highlight differences by specific timing of this. Okay, next question. In a validation process for CPR and certification basis definition, the date of application to the CA is the one to be considered by the VA. Can you confirm?
Yes.
If yes?
Yes. I mean, the same question we had previously. So we are talking about airworthiness definition. So the date of application to the CA will be the date, well, the date of application, the date of reference taken by the CA to establish its own certification base for that approval will be taken as a reference by the VA to define its own applicable airworthiness requirement.
Okay. Next one. Aircraft flying in a third country being imported by the validating authority. How to assess the basic acceptance changes installed on that aircraft manufactured under the certificating authority? Need to think a bit. Aircraft flying in a third country, imported by the VA. So if not wrong, the applicant must refer to the manufacturer. Daniel, do you have something?
Yes. In this case, I assume that the export authority is different from ANAC or EASA, yeah? So
Yeah.
in order to issue the export certificate, the export authority should check the aircraft logbook and see what kind of changes were embodied in its system, and see it's already validated at ANAC. But it's a case outside of an ANAC and EASA system. It depends of even other bilateral rules between the third country and ANAC or EASA.
And the importing country. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Next one. Can you define what constitutes appreciable effect on OSD? Oh, yes, this was already answered. So the new supplemental instructions in ANAC, issued by ANAC recently, brings these definitions. Next one, criterion 3 for non-basic. If there is a change affecting AD issued by CA unilaterally or by CA and VA simultaneously, could it be considered as basic? I think this question was already answered by Charles. Okay, that was already F.
Yeah, I think if I may, what is behind this question is that an effect to an AD is not per se criteria to classify as non-basic. It's not because there is an effect on the AD that the change is non-basic. You need to look at what is that AD. Once again, if that AD is a VA only unilateral AD, then of course, because you are asking the VA to validate, then it will be non-basic. Also, if you change, affect an AD for which the VA is the state of design of the product. And these are the examples I provided before. But if there is an AD, a normal AD, the CA being the state of design, and both the CA and the VA have accepted and agreed on that AD, there's no reason particularly for which the design change would be classified as non-basic.
Okay, thank you, Charles. And we have the last question here. Have concurrent validation process changed in revision 5 of this tip? So I don't think so. We have both definitions, the sequential validation and the concurrent validation. Both of them are possible. At the first glance, I do not see any difference. So Charles?
Well, if I may, the process itself has not that much change. You will see in the TIP revision 5 the adoption of the wording that is very similar to what you find in the EASA FA tip and potentially on the ANAC FA IPA, providing possibilities of adopting, endorsing the IP or the FICAs or the decrees that would be issued by the CA, or defining, having a work sharing plan, or defining a common certification basis between the CA and the VA. These are usual practices which were already present in other tips, but that were not in the tip revision 4. So you will find in tip revision 5 those particular provisions. However, there's no revolution on the way the concurrent validation should be conducted.
Okay, thank you, Charles. I'm just checking again if all the questions are considered. Is it the current validation process changing? Yes, I think we already went through all the questions. Okay, so yes, so I think we have already concluded. So I would like to, whoops, I think there's one more question raised. Is an applicant supposed to systematically submit an application to the CA to have the CA checking change criteria? I would say yes. For applying to the VA for a validation, for a design validation, you must get the certificate in authority concurrence. And it will be given by the endorsement letter or any other evidence that the CA concurs with the classification and the CA have checked all the application package. Okay. One more question here. Yes.
Sorry, but except if the change is accepted.
Of course, of course.
If there is a need for application, then the CA must be consulted.
Yeah, that's it. If it's eligible for acceptance, there will be no application. Yeah. Will there be a list of basic acceptance changes updated and shared between ANAC and EASA? No, I understood right here. No, there will be no a list of changes that can be automatically accepted. They must go to the criteria on the tip, and if attended, so it will be accepted. Hey guys, if we have no more questions.
Yeah, just on that one, maybe I think it's making reference to the previous obligation that was made in the tip to regularly exchange on those acceptance, on those design changes which has been accepted. In the tip revision 5, there's no such exigency. It's not a requirement. However, it says that upon request of the VA, the CA should provide that list of design, so typically of basic accepted. So I would say, to answer really the question, it would be up to the CA and the VA to have an agreement between themselves on whether they want to be informed of those regularly, of those changes which have been approved and as basic changes. But there's no more any firm obligation as per the tip as was previously in the tip revision form.
Okay, thank you, Charles. So one more question arises. When a company wants to sell or buy an aircraft within the jurisdiction of Brazil or European Union, in accordance with revision 5 of the tip, what changed from last revision? So there's some subjective question here, but what we have changed is the process for design approval and acceptance and validation from design from each other countries. So if you have an aircraft flying in EU and wants to sell it to an operator in Brazil, EASA shall issue an export certificate of airworthiness, and it will check if all changes are appropriately validated in Brazil. So if you have anything else, Daniel?
Yes, I would say the tip is mainly focused on design, not the aircraft serial number by itself. Of course, if the aircraft serial number has some designs embodied to it, maybe it's easy to validate such design using the new tip criteria. This is what I'm envisioning, okay? But mainly the tip is with regards design, not serial aircraft serial numbers.
Okay, Charles, please.
Yes, a few words on that. Once, if we want to talk about the novelties brought by the revision 5 thing, that's a bit what the question was about. You mentioned the alterations. The alterations were not part of the revision 4. It's now part of the revision 5, a bit similar to what we have with the FAA. And it caters for the automatic acceptance for one serial number at time for use aircraft at time of import to EU. It's an automatic acceptance of any alteration that will have been approved or are accepted by ANAC, provided it does not affect a critical component. That's one of the main changes, you would say. The second one, which will enable me to come back to one of the previous questions, and it has a link with several other questions we've received, is about the basic acceptance changes. We've changed the criteria, so obviously there will be change in what constitutes basic versus what were the previous major change level 2. But when we talk about acceptance, the main point to be really understood is that we explain that the CA does not have systematically to provide the VA with a list of those basic major change. However, when you go to the chapter 331 for acceptance, the TC holder or the STC holder has the requirement to maintain a type design data for the validating authority. So that means that anything that is basic accepted needs to be maintained, controlled by the type certificate holder, and including in its type design data for validation, which means that at any time, a type certificate holder or STC holder should be in a position to say, my design for this validating authority has evolved in that manner, and I can provide the information. So the information is not lost, although it's not public. We do not issue a list of all those major changes. However, the TIP makes a requirement for the TC holder to have that process in place in order to be able to have at any point a clear vision of what has been classified as basic and is considered valid in the other party. And that's a very important provision of the TIP that answers to many of the questions we can feel from the questions we had about what is the status of a basic change, how do I know that it has been approved or not. That's typically answered as per this provision of the paragraph 331.
Thank you. So we have 3 more questions now. So the criteria to be used to define whether a design modification has an appreciable effect on OSD will be those from the CA or the VA. So we are talking about the process for design validations. So the appreciable effect will be those from the VA. Okay, so if you are validating a design in ANAC, so you will go to the appreciable effect on that you can grab from the supplemental instructions ANAC issued on the OSD. If you are validating EASA, you go to the regulation from EASA. Okay. Is there any provisions or governance on the TIP? Regular meeting between the authorities to discuss its application and case studies. So ANAC-EASA are always in contact. So we have recurrent meetings between the areas for international cooperation, which which Jean-Louis and I took part. Okay, and we have also the high-level meetings between EASA and ANAC every year, at least the last years, 2002 times a year. It's been performed. Okay, and we are always discussing questions, issues, and opportunities for improvement between ANAC and EASA. So, yes. Next question. How to consider the SEIs as applicant? I don't know if I understood right this question. So if you're an applicant, you will classify the change as basic or non-basic, and if it's non-basic, you may make an assessment on the change to see what are the SEIs affected. So it will help the validating authority when establishing its own involvement. General way, I think that's the answer. So Charles, you have something else?
Yeah, I think you get it, Eduardo, that I mean, the difference between basic and non-basic, and in case of non-basic, as per I was referring to the new defined application data package, you find in a paragraph that explains what should be submitted as part of a non-basic application. There is a requirement to provide a list of proposed areas of VA level of involvement, including the identified SCIs that would be affected by the change. So that's what the applicant would have to propose as part of the application package.
Okay. So we are receiving more questions. So referring to the TIP revision 5, validation workflow slide, would you please confirm if all major changes are required to have an application to the VA through the CA? I need to check again the eligibility criteria for automatic acceptance. And those in that criteria, if we have, one of those criteria for the acceptance eligibility are the design changes proposed by the design approval holder that was classified as basic and that do not require the CA to issue a new approval document. So also major changes proposed by the design approval holder and classified as basic, they are also accepted. They are also eligible for acceptance. Okay. Next one, for a basic change, will the CA require a declaration of compliance with VA requirement to be able to confirm the acceptance of the change? How will the acceptance be formalized? Sorry, I did not understand this question. Let me read it again. A basic change. Charles?
This one, if you want, Eduardo, two cases. Basic change, if it is a streamlined basic that you need to apply for validation, and as per the application package and the process, you will need, as an applicant, to have a declaration of compliance endorsed by UCA by means of a statement of compliance. Now, if we are in the case of a basic change, it does not go to validation, so it's not a basic streamline. It's a fully accepted basic design change. And the tip says that those basic changes are accepted, provided they are approved by the CA in accordance with their within their framework against the CA and the VA applicable requirements. So that means, de facto, that there needs to be a declaration of compliance with the VA's requirement that is checked and endorsed by the CA. Yes, but it does not change that much from the major changes level 2 previously. That's exactly the same thing with respect to that process.
Yes, I can confirm the same from ANAC view.
Okay, thank you. So can ANAC and EASA share its experience with the work plan used with the FAA? Is it good in terms of predictability, performance, level of involvement, etc.? Any comment on that? So for now, I will ask for the experience from colleagues from the certification department. So you have something, Daniel or Charles?
Well, what we can share for me is that the use of a validation work plan is definitely recognized as an appropriate tool to provide predictability, visibility, and discipline in the level of involvement exercised by the VA, which is something that has been identified as not usual and previously applied systematically between an EASA and ANAC validation. This is what we're proposing to put into place with the TIP revision 5. So we do believe that the systematic use of a validation work plan will bring that predictability, visibility, and discipline in the exercise of the VA level of involvement.
Okay, thank you. Next question, how will the acceptance be formalized? So the acceptance is formalized by the issuance of a design approval by the certificating authority. Once the validating authority identifies that the design was approved by the certificating authority against its certification basis, it's accepted. I don't think we issued any other evidence of approval in such cases. No.
But once again, if I may come back to the previous point, those basic accepted changes, obviously the ones which are not submitted to streamline validation, so the real basic accepted changes will be considered as approved by the VA, but they are included in the type design data by the certificating holder. So that's at this point, it's a real process that needs to be put in place by the TC holder or the STC holder in order to make sure that there is a formalization of this accepted status for this change.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Charles, for this contribution. Is there any other question? So we went to 28 questions at this time. Okay. If we have any other, oops, we have one other. Is the work plan a living document throughout the project? Once agreed, no changes on the level of involvement should be expected. No. Yeah, it's indeed a living document. The work plan is issued after the familiarization. And of course, during the discussions between the authorities and the applicant, the level of involvement may change. And the TIP already have provisions for that, including the need for the approval by the management of the validating authority if the level of involvement arises. If we expand the involvement from the validating authorities, it should be approved by the management. So yes, it is a living document. Okay, guys. So if you have no other questions, so I would like to thank you all for the attendance. Thank you very much for your interest and the procedures and the new revision of the technical implementation procedures. I would like to thank you very much, my colleague Daniel Pessoa, and our good colleagues from the EASA, Jean-Louis and Charles Leboeuf. Yes, so goodbye and have a nice day.
If I may, thank you very much for ANAC for providing this YouTube channel to provide almost Urbi et Orbi this good information on the TIP revision 5 and looking for a good implementation of TIP revision 5. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hey guys, thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you.